finish sort of explicating my explanation. I thought I was just on a roll and I was really doing some good work there, but got interrupted by, I don't even know, YouTube problems. Uh, anyway, I guess let me just start at the second half because, like I said, I'm explicating this poem 1111 Palo Alto, directed by Gia Coppola. I was explaining how I'm not pandering for Gen Z audience. Well, okay, so this kid yesterday, this kid at WXOU radio, he said Gen Z likes realism, or they just like appreciate real. I mean, I didn't want to say this because it sounds fucking like I'm tooting my own horn or something, but when you're ahead of your time, right? It's like it's the people who are younger who are going to understand what you're doing. People your own age aren't going to get what you're doing. Whereas like people who are from the future, which is what younger people are, like when I started making vlog type videos in 2014, everybody just thought, stop filming us. What the fuck is this? This is narcissistic. Now it's our whole fucking culture is everybody filming their own TikToks, filming. So it's like, I don't know, your contemporaries don't get you. It takes time for the fucking culture to catch up. But I don't know. I think that's also like a talent development thing. Is like it takes longer to develop if you do it on your own, and if it takes 10 fucking years. If you do it in clubs, if you do it in bars, if you do it out in the real world. Do you think I also live in some bygone era of the past? I mean, well, okay, one of the things I was talking about, thank you for watching, by the way. One of the things I was talking about earlier was just like the economics of our lifetime and how we live in this Reagan era. Everything's privatized, everything's deregulated. We're independent contractors. There's been no sense of permanence or continuity economy in my life whatsoever. I've always been a 1099, no insurance, all of that kind of shit. That's one reason why I sort of idealize this kind of beatnik era and like these poets of Manhattan specifically who live in rent-controlled apartments, because that was the ideal situation for just like a human life, to be honest, where it's like your rent is sustainably cheap. You don't have to hardly work. You could be a poet and live on fucking Bleecker Street, right? You could have a $30 a month apartment. And so you had this village of artists, painters, poets, jazz musicians who could actually make work that wasn't economically driven. That's why everything went kind of abstract and everything became interesting, because suddenly the audience was there that was intelligent enough. Now what you have in New York is you have people working their fucking balls off. Yeah, exactly. Look at Zlad. He works 40 plus hours a week, and he also goes out and parties 40 plus hours a week. It's like, that's about the only way, or you same deal. And it's like, so for me, I don't know, the last 2 years anyway, I've been sort of living in this like bygone romantic kind of like fantasy world. And to be honest, there should be an opportunity for people our age, in our lifetime, in our generation, to live this way. To only have to pay $500 a month for like actually a nice apartment, because it's just like I'm capable of doing so many more interesting things. Doing this, hosting the salons, meeting other artists. We've only begun to fucking like make these connections and form these kind of like collaborations. If everybody had a centralized location and a neighborhood and like free time to just like hang out and experiment, you know. So in that sense, I do look at the 50s, 60s, 70s era of poets, you know, the New York School. The reason why that existed was because of the economic conditions of rent-controlled apartments. Look at all those fucking artists from the 70s. That's all they fucking talk about. Richard Hell, Patti Smith. Eileen Miles still lives in a rent-controlled apartment. Eileen Miles pays probably less than $500 a month rent today. You know, like, that's a pretty ideal economics. You know, I hope to be 75 fucking years old and paying less than $400 a month for an apartment. You know, like, in a certain way, I don't think that they can relate to us economically because of that. Like, the rental situation for people in our generation is so vastly different than that. You know, you're not going to find a centrally located studio apartment in a nice neighborhood. Like, everybody our age lives way out in fucking Crown Heights or Ridgewood or Bay Ridge, or, and so, like, that's kind of it's almost like an economic reality that, like, has just been wiped away. You know, like, even Eileen Miles doesn't really make a point to, like, promote the idea of rent-controlled apartments or something for artists. It's way more about identity, right? In New York, I just, you know, like, there should be, you know, like, the housing shortage, the housing crisis is such a fucking huge thing for our generation, and yet, like, there's a lot of empty. I think I saw that, like, Manhattan's population actually has gone down by like 200,000 people since the pandemic. So it's like, the real estate is there. There's tons of empty fucking apartments. It's just rich people own them, or it's a pied-a-terre for the whole world. Like I said in my fucking piece, it's like, there's tons of people who come here for like a few weeks a year who just are super rich. I mean, if I try to live in a bygone era, that's why I would say, yeah, Occupy was the last thing politically that, you know, that happened in my 20s, and, like, that to me was like, not that the things, you know, a lot of hardcore shit has happened in the last few years, but, like, you know, the fact that it's so hard to just make ends meet fucks up people's lives in, like, a vastly more significant way. Like, millennials in particular. I mean, these Gen Z kids give me so much shit for, like, and give millennials so much shit, but it's just like, we were born into, I graduated college literally like the month before the recession, right? And, like, all of the Ayn Rand shit, all of the, like, psychotic right-wing, we want to cut taxes, we want to, you know, we want to cut government spending, it's all, like, it's all work to just, like, put money in less and less hands, put more and more and more. Yeah, I mean, well, that's the other thing, is, like, now everything, I think because there's no foothold in reality, there's no place for just, like, organic, funky artists to, like, form neighborhoods and shit. And it's like, everybody has to go into an institution. Every poet has gone into a fucking institution. In the 50s, that wasn't the case. You know, in the 70s, that wasn't the case. These older people you see in the East Village, you know, they haven't had to become professors, all of them, like people our age, because they could afford, you know, to pay for a fucking $400 a month apartment for the rest of their life and buy a house upstate or whatever. It's like, everybody our age is scrambling for prestige, scrambling for clout, scrambling for institutional grants, you know, institutional kind of blessing, because there's no other way unless you want to, like, work in a fucking restaurant and just be miserable. You know, you have to have some kind of corporate job or whatever just to even make ends meet now. And so it's like you're going to be writing your free time, you know? You're going to work full time and then you're going to have like a few hours to like work, you know, work on your craft. That's always going to be a side thing. I mean, America has never really like championed fucking poets especially, but like the fucking the MFA thing feels like cowardly to me. It does feel like if especially if you're a goddamn poet, your obligation is to like be outside these systems of like state power. There's a very narrow edge now, but like it's still kind of there. I wish that people would fight politically for this kind of shit. Like, there should be like a fucking tiny house movement or something. You know, people should innovate. They should be allowed to innovate with like communities. You know, now the bank owns everything. All the land is sort of, you know, it's all policed. There's security everywhere. It's like you can't just like squat necessarily. But the second half of this poem about the whale fucking the glass, this is what I wanted to kind of go into. I wanted to kind of talk about this. This was written later. I wrote this actually at an open mic, the open mic they do at Cuckoo's, or at Soho Playhouse, Friday midnight. It's the best open mic because there's no time limit and you can do whatever the fuck you want. So this guy, he actually came to the open mic at KGB. I forget what his name is, Alberto. He actually said all this shit. I was like, he didn't say this exactly, but he was saying all this shit about the whale lost its mind fucking the glass. He didn't say that exactly, but he was telling some story about SeaWorld. And he is funny, man. Of all the comedians I've seen, I'd say that guy is like, he's actually pretty funny. He just kind of, he knows how to be funny. His material isn't necessarily like chiseled out totally, but like I like that better, you know? This open mic is great because it's just people, it's like listening to jazz guys just kind of go off. Not necessarily that, you know, it's interesting. So I'm sitting there at my little cabaret table with my notebook and I'm like, you know, I wasn't transcribing, but I was sort of paraphrasing the story he was telling about this whale. They took it to SeaWorld in Indianapolis, which, like, what could be worse than fucking being a shamu at SeaWorld in Indianapolis? Like, of all fucking, like, that would be, like, the worst goddamn hell. Poor Tillicum. So the whale, I forget why, but it was super horny. A lot of the guys act. He was talking about how he had super bad allergies, and it's because all the trees in New York are male. And so allergy season is when the trees are like super horny, right? They all are trying to fuck, so they're super pollen-y and shit. And so that's when your allergies are really bad, and it's because of the toxic masculinity and the stupid men. For some reason, 80% of the trees in New York are male, is the first lines of this stanza, right? And so that's sort of a commentary on toxic masculinity or sausage parties or dude fests or the comedy scene maybe, I don't know. Just, you know, that's my life. 80% of the trees are male. And it is an allergic thing. It does cause like a poisonous allergic reaction. It's a what do I say, testosterone overabundance. I mentioned this in a few poems in the thing because I thought it was an interest. If you read my book, it's in a few of the pieces. This trivia, you know, a lot of times I'll use like a fact, you know, like I'm not necessarily closing the issue here. I'm really just presenting a piece of information. 80% of the trees in New York City are male. And so, you know, I'm sort of implying to the reader a stance or like a relationship or like, you know, an image or a position, But I'm not, I guess if you were a real poet, you would like take this and be like, the male trees are, I don't know, you take that metaphor someplace that like would really complete some kind of rhetorical metonymy about why why is it significant that 80% of the trees in New York are male, and that the whale lost its mind fucking the glass in Indianapolis. I mean, part of my point with this chapbook was I did want to reclaim my sexuality to some degree, my radical male sexuality. I'm part of the men's movement. Sort of against my will. I didn't intend this. Not, maybe not, but I don't know. I don't think you can go into comedy world. And we're, as a man and as a straight man, I don't know, you write poetry. You're horny and you write poetry. And that's nature, and that's flowers. And that's why the poems are about flowers, because we're horny. And those are our metaphors for our gonads and our testes and our stamen and our pistil and our, our pistils and stamen and shit. And our vascular, horny flow and infusion of blood and whatnot. And stiffies. And so this stanza is sort of about male sexuality. A lot of this book, I'm reclaiming my male horniness. Respect the cock. Respect the cock. Is what this fucking chapbook. This is by Frank T.J. Mackey. No, I mean, I'm kidding. But, I have to be honest about my experience. And to be honest, like, a lot of it was inspired by, like, Billy Bedloe. Seeing Billy Bedloe's, like, sort of taking ownership of sex. And, I mentioned him in one of the stanzas in here. And sex is at the heart of inspiration. I'm sorry, but it is. And romanticism and flowers, it's all sexual horniness and passion. And it's like a big Victoria's Secret commercial directed by Michael Bay, okay? Everybody wants to fuck. And that's what poetry's about. And so, fucking the glass in Indianapolis, right? And drowning in your own jizz is a metaphor for writing. And, exactly. BP is the audience. Yes. Yeah, it's a metaphor for the insanity of male horniness. I mean, I'm sure for women, they're horny too, but like, males are jack-off machines, and like, it never ends. And that's what this is, this is literally, just the metaphor of the whale drowning in Indianapolis. The image of that. Henri Cole said, my poetry professor in college, Henri Cole, my professor, he taught me everything I know. A very horny poet. Taught me everything I know. He said, end on an image and don't explain it. And I don't think, why would you ever explain an image? The image is the whale fucking the glass in Indianapolis. Cum doesn't sink, it floats. Like a boat, then it dissipates. He was fucking the aquarium so much, the pool filled with jizz, and he drowned. I mean, that is incels. The Shamu was involuntarily celibate. That's not fair. And fucking the aquarium is like, I don't know, that's porn, that's internet porn. Cum doesn't sink, it floats. Cum is thicker than water. Is cum thicker than blood? I think it is. Cum might be the thickest. Cum thicket is the thickest of all. It's what binds us. The ropey cum of Moby Dick. The ropey cum of Moby Dick. That's my new poem. Let me write that down. Fucking might forget it. Here's another lesson, kids. Write everything down. The ropey come. Or what was it? Melville would be proud. Well, I don't know. It's a slippery slope, you know. I don't want to totally like, ropey come. That's my favorite Led Zeppelin song. The ropey come of Moby Dick. Or that's more like that's like a Modest Mouse song maybe, or like a Death Cab for Cutie. It's a Death Cab for Cutie song. The ropey. Anyway, yeah, so that's what that poem's about. There you go. There's my close reading. It's Indianapolis rhymes with glass. That's significant. Throwing that rhyme in about it floats like a boat. You know, if you throw rhymes in, especially when you're doing sort of limericky, dirty stuff, the audience really loves that shit. I don't ever hardly listen to Spotify because, well, I'm sure there's probably some. I'll look at it. I'm not a subscriber, so I don't even know if I can get a fucking Spotify Wrapped. I imagine it's probably Bob Dylan and Jimmy Buffett. Actually, I did listen to like every Led Zeppelin album this year. It's in one of my chat books. I talk about it. So, the ropey come of Led Zeppelin's dick is probably in there. Yeah, everybody's doing their Spotify Wrapped today in their moods. In the morning, I'm like trippy, mellow, calm, relaxing, energized, caffeinated. Mine would probably be I get high. I listen to music like in the middle of the day when I'm like getting ready for shit. But mostly I've been listening to wrestling podcasts. All right. The great Kelsey Bruner, everybody. Yes. Okay. My Spotify Wrapped this year, probably a lot of country and western, probably a lot of George Strait. I wish I could get like a YouTube Wrapped. Can I get like a YouTube, like my genre is wrestling shoot videos. I listened to a lot of Howard Stern this year. I can tell you exactly what I listened to because I listen to mostly like I go through these weird like seasonal changes. I'll get obsessed with something. Like I listen to Howard Stern literally from like May to probably like October. To like September or October. That's like literally all I fucking listened to was Howard Stern. To be honest, like that's one of the exciting things about the internet is like certain things you discover their value in a way. The tools, you know, like are there for like Howard Stern's 4-hour-long radio show, right? It kind of went underground when it went on satellite, but like YouTube, it works really well because it's like a fucking podcast, basically. It's essentially a podcast, except they filmed the fucking thing. So there's episodes from the 90s that are like the Joe Rogan fucking podcast or something. It's just he was doing that in 1995. You know, they've got Al Michaels or David Lee Roth, or they're talking about OJ or whatever. It's like the thing that's interesting about Howard Stern is like it's like reality show. He brings the people who work on his show. He brings his life into it. It's a live stream. It's like a fucking Twitch stream. And like he makes it this theater. Of the mind, right? Because it's a radio show, it is like he's writing. There is something that's like vivid about it. He's got these people that are like comedy minds, and so they're able to create this fucking like comedy. It's as funny as a skit or it's almost like watching a fucking one-act play or something. where it's like it's in this studio and it's like the silence of Howard Stern's show is kind of like, you know, like he knows the fidelity of the kind of like bandwidth of like his voice and shit. And so he very much uses all the theater of that to kind of paint a picture. You know, like, I don't know. Music, I find, it's more like action. It gets me up, gets me moving. So I have to like use it, you know, or like you're trying to portray a kind of like a romanticized mood or tone, or if you know the song Troubadour by George Strait. I listened to a lot of George Jones this year. That was my obsession in like March, April, May. I was all about George Jones. Choices. Walls Can Fall. Ragged But I'm Right is one of the greatest songs. That was probably my song of the year. The original recording. George Jones from Ragged But I'm Right. Because I'm country, okay? I saw all the pictures of Nebraska and the big sky and shit. That's like a more, I don't listen to things while I'm walking. Nebraska is like a more Ohio than Ohio is. It seemed like the most profound version of Ohio. It's just so horizontal and flat. And I don't listen to music while I'm walking because a lot of the time when I'm walking, actually, I'm recording myself talking because I just can't stop. I have oral fixation, and it makes the time pass faster. Like, I find, you know, if I'm walking from here to KGB, that's like a half-hour walk, or from here to St. Mark's. Platonic ideal of Middle America. Interesting. Tell me more. You know, if I'm walking from here to St. Mark's, it's like 40 minutes maybe. That's a good clip. And so if I find if I start talking, the time goes like that. Because I love talking so much. And I'm practicing. I do think that like oral composition is like a big part of what I'm interested in, and a big part of my poetry. You know, that's what Homer fucking did. Spontaneous oral composition. And in order to tell the whole fucking story, I think, you know, I don't consciously try to poeticize like my speeches. But I do think just from writing and reading poetry a lot, your vocal takes on a heightened and even like a pictorial awareness and capability. If you transcribe, like you listen to these videos with CC, you're doing it the right way, because it's really, you're supposed to read it. You know, you're supposed to, it's a thank you. Kelsey Bruin, yeah, she, I'm excited. I'm excited to talk. And, you know, I mean, I'd like to do interviews. I'd like to get other people involved. It's not necessarily about me, always. You know, I'd like to have and conversation, right? The art of conversation is really the same thing, except you have a partner, and, you know, that's better. You know, like my favorite movie is My Dinner with Andre. It's because it's about conversation, you know? And I think if you have, you know, like highly verbal, highly entertaining, you know, like it becomes, it's like a collaboration with writing. It's like you're writing a play together. You know, it's like Cowboy Mouth. You know, like or you know, like, look at jazz. These fucking guys, they don't talk about, yeah, I've wanted to do that. I wanted to do that. Absolutely. We should. I agree. Good idea. You know, these jazz guys aren't like, you know, then we hit this. it's all unspoken. They fucking just play. And like they learn by playing and they learn by listening. It's conversational. I think the internet invites improvisation and invites huge works, right? You can talk a lot. You can put a lot of video up. You can put a lot of music up. You can put all of your paintings up. You can put a lot of art. And why not? You know, why it encourages us. Look at jazz. It encourages us to use these huge spaces. And so why the fuck not? And so improvisation, I think we can't help it. Once again, these things that we didn't know were as like another thing I listened to a lot on YouTube or was listening to a lot was like Grateful Dead shit. And the thing about the Grateful Dead is they recorded every fucking show, right? So in the 80s, that was like an underground tape thing. People would trade, you know, Dick's Picks or whatever the fuck. Oh, I got this show, and you know, they would make dubs for each other and shit. Then you have fucking YouTube. Now it's like I can get on fucking YouTube and listen to any goddamn Grateful Dead show immediately. And so as artists, they have this tremendous body of work that is, you know, as far as I'm concerned, Jerry Garcia's art form was improvising and being in the moment. I think because of the means of distribution and the technologies, art has been in this like very like things need to be rehearsed, things need to be multi-track recorded, and you know, or like literature, right? Literature needs to be revised. It needs to be like really thought over, poured over, and rewritten and this and that. Whereas like now it's like we're invited to create things in the moment. You know, writers are you know, I don't get why more writers aren't working in a podcast space or in entertainment space. Why aren't there more poets who are trying to be entertainers or trying to work as improvisers? Like everybody's trying to write some fucking book that takes 3 years or something and get with some major publisher. It's like this is the last 4 months of my life. You know, the most recent entry is like 11/22 or something, maybe 11/11. So it's like, this is hot off the press. You know, there's an immediacy, I think, that we're being invited into, and the writing style, I think, needs to keep up. You know, when these people are revising their sentences and like working shit over and putting in semicolons and fucking commas and all of this bullshit, they are pretending that they're like Henry James or something, or Raymond Carver or whatever. It's like things have sped up so goddamn much in the last 10 fucking years. And I do think that's why there's autofiction. You know, like autofiction is reflecting, like an iPhone is autofiction. You know, if you have a fucking iPhone, you're filming your life. You're filming, and I don't know, it's weird because when you film something, it does become like aesthetic. It does become like an art piece, but also a sort of documentary piece. I think interesting things are breaking down between the idea of documentary and the idea of reality right now. I think that's one reason why I'm so interested in wrestling, because wrestling is one of the few places where they sort of conscientiously use reality, but also kind of try to like shape it or something. And like now everybody's a reality fucking presence and star and whatever. Everybody's an Instagram, whatever. I mean, that is like the medium, right? That is like, even fucking NBC, The Tonight Show, puts their shit on YouTube, right? They put clips on Instagram and shit. Like, you know, I think there's something to be said for like making a really good book that takes 5 years to write too. I'm not saying don't do that, but like, uh, I think as artists, it's like you can have a lot, a lot of things on the burner at once. So, you know, like this, I can put these out for, you know, 4 times a year or however many times a year. And then I can also put out a book that takes 3 years to write. I can also, you know, I can put out a TV show that's like a documentary of my life, but I could also like write a movie that takes a couple years to make or something. Like, I don't know. But to some degree, it's like I do think we're being offered an opportunity to like make our life, particularly when you're coming to something like auto fiction. It's like it's a first draft, right? I know that when I started filming my life and turning it into like a TV show, I did start to conscientiously think more about like, well, uh, would this be good for a TV show? Would this be a good storyline? Could I film this? You know, or like what would be an epic, you know, if I'm going to go to LA, if I'm going to go to San Francisco, I'm going to go to Paris. It's like, I'm going to make a film of that, you know? And so as you're living it, you're also like, well, not that you're necessarily overly conscientious about that. Yeah, right. Yeah, Ken Burns takes a long time to do those movies. You know, he'll work like that, like a decade on a thing, you know? Um, I think like as an artist, it is up to everybody to kind of learn their own rhythms and learn how these things. It's like you know, a tree bears fruit a certain way, right? And so like that's what my, you know, not to be overly self-absorbed or whatever, but like that's what it feels like when I started to do things that felt more real. Was it's like it just felt like I started to be more aware of like, okay, this thing is sort of I want to do it in this way. You know, I don't want to sit down at a desk and write a novel. Like I tried that. It almost killed me, especially as a young person. It was just not good for my body. My body, my energy was just like would not tolerate that. You know, I'm not an alcoholic novelist guy. Like I wanted to live my life, especially when I was going to move to New York. You know, I moved to New York when I was 25. I was trying to be a novelist or whatever. There was no way I could like live in New York and like have that adventure of like being out in the world, meeting people and having experience and writing a novel. Like you're taking yourself out of experience. It takes a lot of time. And so in a certain way, it took me a decade to sort of adapt my process to become something that felt like this is actually what I wanted to do the whole time. You know, putting out these books, putting out fucking videos and shit, like, is something. The way that I write poetry now is more like the way I wrote poetry in high school. Like, in high school, I had this idea. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to write a sequence of poems that was like titled after Beatles songs, which, like, you know, is kind of a stupid idea, but like that is basically what I'm doing now, in a way. You know, like this poem is called fucking Palo Alto, directed by Gia Coppola, you know? And even at that time, I think probably like the poetry that I was most like aware of stylistically or something, or capable of or wanted to imitate, was like something that was like very simple, like William Carlos Williams, or like haiku. You know, like it felt like I wanted to do something that was like just like simple and kind of like archetypal or something. There felt like there was like something American about that, but also like by using pop culture, you could like at that time in my life, I was feeling very young and I was in love and like, going through puberty and like listening to the early Beatles music. That was like the soundtrack of like my early kind of like longing and whatever, yearning and like kind of erotic feelings to some degree. The feelings I'm talking about in this book, the allergy feelings, and like those songs like Mr. Moonlight or whatever. I don't know. Like that was a way of like, I don't know, possessing them, kind of showing them to people, being like, hey, this is cool, reminding people of that, but also like using the stylistic tone of that to kind of like insinuate the climate and the temper you want in the reader, right? And so like that, all of those things that I just mentioned, the simplicity of the word choices, that was all shit I was basically trying to do in like 11th grade, 10th, 11th grade. But I tried to do all this other shit in between, trying to learn how to do it the right way. But also it took me a long time to sort of like study and gather a lot of different influences that sort of like told me, and now I've filtered that urge or like that energy inside me, because I do think a lot of the way our art looks, or like the rhythm, the form, the texture, it is like there's an energy in each of us. When my grandpa died last month, and I see this energy in him, he was just an energetic, and my mom has the same energy, and I have this energy. This is something that people comment on usually after performances. Almost always people comment on my energy. And like my work looks like that. It has to, the writing has to reflect that energy. The form of the way that I write and the way that it sort of comes out my hand or whatever into the book, the way I do readings. Like I'm a performer, I'm a ham, I'm a high energy performer. I have to do that when I do poetry readings. But it's taken me a long time to actually like arrive where I first started, right? Like I had this idea the whole time. This was in me the whole time. But I had to sort of study all these other things to sort of give myself permission, but also to cultivate and refine those stylistic things. Like I'm not only doing those things, but like now those original impulses have been filtered through, like I'm aware of things like Lou Welch or Diane DePrima or, Ashbery Flowchart or Bernadette Mayer or Ted Berrigan or Alice Notley or any number of things. Now it's like having read that work and sort of like studied it at length, seeing how it all connects, seeing how it connects the economics, the real life, the actual people, seeing their energy, seeing them read, seeing where they live, seeing the community of poets, whatever it is, studying older poets, seeing how they did it, going to LA, studying those poets, going to San Francisco, studying those poets, going to Europe, studying those poets, or Paris rather, going to Ohio, studying those fucking poets, studying Columbus, seeing what the fuck is going on there. Poets of the Midwest, Vachel Lindsay, fucking Carl Sandburg, Maxwell Bodenheimer. You mentioned Harry Kemp. Like, now all of that stuff reinforces the idea of being this sort of like street troubadour, pamphleteer, like telling it like it is, part stand-up comedian, part professional wrestler, trying to be a populist to some degree, but also trying to be avant-garde or, being aware of those sensibilities, trying to incorporate Eileen Myles. You know, most of my work is sort of like uh, an Eileen Myles kind of rip off in a lot of ways. But I'm aware of the lineage, you know. I know that Eileen Myles is doing James Schuyler and doing Frank O'Hara and doing kind of language poetry stuff and this and that. And so I don't know. That's what they'd fucking teach you in fucking college. You know, that's more or less what they're giving you in college. They're like they're applying that to you. They're saying, "Hey, here's all these professors like they're going to mentor you. They're going to sort of like I don't know. I'm obsessed with like the lives of the poets because I do think that it's up to a poet to be like an original person. And so to have all these institutions, it does feel like there's almost like an industrialization or something, like a stamp, a mass production or something that's happening. Like these poets are like cans, you know, they're soup cans. They're not fucking little druids or something. You know, I want to meet magical outlaw people, which is like, you know, all the people I met at Pete's, like, you know, the consortium of yourself and Billy Pito and the, you know, great Carlos and all of the people, you know, are amazing. And so I have to sign off because I have to go to work. But that's a little bit of more poetry theory. What good will it do ya? We have to become pop culture icons. You know, that's my only chance. Is I have to become as big as like Adam Sandler. I want a Happy Madison style of I want to meet the elfish druid people. I can't go to Pete's. The worst part about this poetry project job is it takes me away from these open mics. I hate to say it. I have to do it because it's my only source of income, but I have to miss all these open mics. I had to miss Pete's last month, I think, because I had to fucking work. And I'd rather be at the open mic, to be honest. If I got paid $150 to do the open mic, I'd do that. That's my goal. To get paid $150 to do the open mic. No, my real goal is I want to be Howie Mandel. I want to host Deal or No Deal. You know? R.I.P. what? What's R.I.P.? Howie Mandel? Did Howie Mandel die? Well, yeah, I'll text you about tomorrow. Thanks for watching. My live stream is obviously burning up the internet. Yeah, exactly right. Larry Rivers, he's the icon. Larry Rivers, the fucking Kramer of painting and poetry. Good old Larry Rivers. Yeah, he was one of the last true fucking wild animals. Just look at him. Saxophone playing maniac. Like, there just has to be people in New York doing that. I'm sorry. Somebody has to do it, okay? It's upon us. We take it upon ourselves to be the raw edge. I feel so betrayed by these institutionalized bastards. They just have turned their back on us while we suffer out here in anonymity. All right, anyway, I got to go to work. Thank you for watching. Matt Proctor, the live streaming sensation. Tell your friends. Get your Bard, you know, between Bard and Bennington and Columbia University, I'm bound to have even 3 people watching my live stream at any one time soon. All right, thank you for watching.